why didn't you think about my baby? What if you were so high you didn't know she was alive? And you just threw her in a dumpster in the cold without a coat? And if that's the case, that means that my baby was crushed in the process of how trash is taken and picked up and placed in a landfill where she will never be found. I will never know. I will never know. I won't get to see my baby again. And as far as the many times that I went to his house during the search, Your Honor, he helped me post flyers of my baby in his neighborhood, on the corner of his house, the street that he lives. He told me, along with his
January 4th, 2022, 10:45 p.m., Eastpointe, Michigan. A silver Dodge Charger slows on a residential street, but it doesn't pull into the driveway where it usually parks. Instead, it stops at the neighbor's house. 17-year-old Zion Foster walks out into 28-degree cold without a jacket. In her phone, his contact reads Favo. Jaylin Brazier, her cousin, age 23. She opens the passenger door and gets in. 2 hours and 14 minutes later, at 12:59 a.m., Zion sends a text to her mother. On my way home. The front door never opens. Her bedroom stays empty. By morning, Sierra Milton is calling everyone she knows. 1 week later, police find Zion's body was never coming home. It had already been collected with the trash. This case isn't about a stranger in a parking lot. It's about the person who sat at birthday parties, who played with the younger kids, who helped hang missing person flyers in his own neighborhood while knowing exactly where she was. You're watching Insanity True Crime. We don't chase headlines. We follow the trail of choices that led to this moment and the 5 months of lies that followed. Zion Foster turned 17 in November 2021. She was a senior at Eastpointe High School, pulling straight A's while working part-time at Detroit Wing Company. Her co-workers remembered her showing up on time, staying late when needed, never complaining about the work, but most people didn't know what she carried outside those shifts. At home, Zion was the oldest of 6 children raised by Sierra Milton, a single mother working multiple jobs to keep the family afloat. When Sierra left for work, Zion stepped in. She made sure homework got done. She settled arguments. She kept the younger ones fed and safe. Her siblings looked up to her, not just because she was the oldest, but because she made them feel protected. Zion had plans. She wanted to become a nurse. She sketched building designs in notebooks during lunch. She listened to music that most of her friends hadn't heard of yet. She had college applications ready to submit. In 2 months, she'd be shopping for a prom dress. In 5 months, she'd be walking across a stage to accept her diploma. On January 4th, 2022, she clocked out of her shift at Detroit Wing Company and texted Jaylin Brazier, her cousin, her favorite, the one Sierra trusted without question. Zion asked her mom, "Can I go see Jaylin?" Sierra said yes. Zion grabbed her phone and a small purse. She didn't take a jacket, even though the temperature had dropped into the 20s. She wasn't planning to be gone long. At 10:45 p.m., the Ring camera on Sierra's porch captured Jaylin's silver Dodge Charger pulling up, not in the driveway like usual, but down the street. Zion walked toward it. She never walked back. Jaylin Brazier was 23 years old in January 2022. He lived in Detroit with his girlfriend and their children, with another on the way. To anyone watching from the outside, he looked like he was building something, a family, a home, stability. To Zion, he was more than a cousin. She'd saved his number in her phone as Favo, short for favorite. On her dad's side of the family, Jaylin was the one she called when she wanted to hang out, the one she trusted. Sierra Milton trusted him too. When Jaylin's name appeared on Zion's phone, there was no pause. No second thought. He was family. He'd been around for years. He'd visited the house. He'd spent time with the kids. There was no reason to say no. But on the night of January 4th, something changed. Jaylin had been to Sierra's house dozens of times before. He knew where the driveway was. He'd parked there, walked up to the door, greeted Sierra face to face. That night, he didn't. At 10:45 p.m., his silver Dodge Charger appeared on the Ring camera. But it didn't pull into the driveway. It stopped down the street, in the neighbor's driveway, out of direct view. Zion walked to the car alone. No conversation at the door. No wave to her mom. Just a 17-year-old girl in freezing weather without a jacket getting into a car that had deliberately parked out of sight. 2 hours later, Zion sent her last text message. On my way home. She never made it to the front door. And when Sierra called Jaylin the next morning, frantic and terrified, asking if he'd seen her daughter, Jaylin looked at his phone and lied. January 5, 2022. Morning. Sierra Milton wakes up and walks to Zion's bedroom. The bed hasn't been slept in. She checks her phone. No missed calls. No new messages. She calls Zion, straight to voicemail. Sierra starts working through her contact list. Friends from school, co-workers from Detroit Wing Company, extended family, anyone who might have seen her daughter in the last 8 hours. No one has. Then she calls Jaylin Brazier. He answers. Sierra asks him directly, have you seen Zion? She said she was with you last night. She never came home. Jaylin's response comes without hesitation. I haven't seen Zion in months. He pauses, then adds, she probably just ran away. You know how she is. His voice is steady, casual. There's no concern in it. No urgency. Sierra hangs up, confused. Zion had told her she was going to see Jaylin. Why would he say he hadn't seen her in months? What Sierra didn't know, what she couldn't have known, was that at that exact moment, Zion's body was wrapped in a black trash bag, stuffed into a dumpster behind Jaylin's apartment building on Greensboro Street in Detroit. 48 hours later, a garbage truck arrived at that dumpster. The hydraulic lift engaged. The container tilted. The contents emptied into the compactor. Zion Foster's body was crushed, transported, and buried under thousands of tons of waste at the Macomb County landfill. By the time police filed an official missing person report, 5 days after Zion disappeared, there was no body to find. No crime scene to process. No physical evidence left to recover. And Jaylin Brazier knew exactly why. Days pass. Sierra Milton doesn't sleep. She prints hundreds of missing person flyers at a local copy shop. Zion's face stares back from every sheet, smiling, hopeful, 17 years old. She drives through Detroit, stopping at every gas station, every convenience store, every street corner. She tapes flyers to windows. She hands them to strangers. She begs anyone who will listen. Have you seen this girl? Then Jaylin Brazier calls her. He tells Sierra he wants to help search. On January 7th, 2 days after Zion vanished, Jaylin meets Sierra in his own neighborhood. He walks beside her down Greensboro Street. They stop at telephone poles, and Jaylin holds the flyers steady while Sierra staples them up. They knock on doors together. Jaylin asks the neighbors, have you seen this girl? She's missing. We're trying to find her. He stands there, looking concerned, acting worried, playing the role of the desperate cousin who just wants his family member home safe. The entire time, Zion's body is sitting in a dumpster less than 200 feet away, behind his apartment building, in the exact same complex where he's helping Sierra search. He walks past that dumpster multiple times. He knows the trash pickup schedule. He knows what's coming. And he says nothing. Sierra later described meeting with Jaylin during those first days. She said he looked her in the eyes and told her, I wouldn't lie to you. I know this has to be scary for you, but I'm telling you, I haven't seen her. I haven't been around her. His mother, Jaleesa, stood beside him and said the same thing. My son wouldn't lie to me. Meanwhile, the Eastpointe Police Department waited and waited. It took 5 full days before they filed an official missing person report. 5 days for evidence to disappear. 5 days for surveillance footage to get recorded over. 5 days for witnesses to forget details. 5 days Jaylin Brazier used to prepare his story. January 10th, 2022, Detroit Police Department. Jaylin Brazier sits across from detectives in an interrogation room. They lay out the phone records first. His cell phone pinged off a tower near Sierra Milton's house at 10:43 p.m. on January 4th. Minutes later, it traveled back toward his apartment in Detroit. The detective asks, can you explain this? Jaylin leans back. My phone was hacked, or cloned. That wasn't me driving. The detective doesn't argue. He reaches for a laptop and turns the screen toward Jaylin. Ring camera footage plays. A silver Dodge Charger pulls up to a residential street. A teenage girl walks toward it. She opens the passenger door. She gets in. The timestamp reads 10:45 p.m., January 4th, 2022. Jaylin watches the video. His expression shifts. "Okay," he says. "Fine. She came over." The detectives wait. "We were smoking weed at my apartment," Jaylin continues. "She was fine at first, then she started acting weird. I think she had a seizure or something. She stopped breathing. I checked on her for like 15-20 minutes, but she was gone." The detective asks, "So what did you do?" Jaylin hesitates. "I panicked. I didn't know what to do. I wrapped her up and put her in the dumpster." The room goes quiet. Then the detective slides a printed document across the table. It's Jaylin's Google search history, pulled from his account. 2:17 a.m., January 5th, 2022. Can you be charged for murder if a body isn't found? Jaylin stares at the page. The detective asks, "Why would you search that if this was an accident?" Jaylin's story shifts again. "It wasn't weed," he says. "It was LSD. She took acid. She had a bad reaction. That's what killed her." The detectives leave the room. They return an hour later with a search warrant for Jaylin's apartment. They find no LSD, no evidence of any hallucinogenic drugs, no pill bottles, no tabs, no paraphernalia that would support his claim. They do find scratches on Jaylin's neck. Fresh, still healing. When asked about them, Jaylin says, "My cat did that." The detectives pull up his phone records again. They show him another search from the night Zion disappeared. How long does it take for a body to decompose? Jaylin doesn't respond. Over the next 2 hours, his story changes 3 more times. First, it was a seizure, then it was weed, then it was LSD, then back to weed again. But one detail never changes. Jaylin Brazier never called 911. He never called Zion's mother. He never called a hospital. He never tried to save her. He wrapped her body in a trash bag, carried it down 2 flights of stairs, and threw it into a dumpster. Then he went back inside, got into bed, and waited for morning. When Sierra called him the next day, frantic and terrified, Jaylin told her he hadn't seen Zion in months. The detectives ask him one final question. "Why didn't you call for help?" Jaylin looks down at his hands. "I was scared," he says. "I didn't know what to do. I thought it looked bad." The detective leans forward. "It looked bad, or you knew what you did?" Jaylin doesn't answer. January 7th, 2022. 2 days after Zion disappeared, a garbage truck pulls up to the dumpster behind Jaylin Brazier's apartment building on Greensboro Street. The hydraulic arm lifts the container. The contents tip into the compactor. The truck drives away. Destination, Macomb County landfill. When detectives finally extract a confession from Jaylin on January 10th, they immediately contact the landfill. But by then, 3 days have passed. Zion's body has been buried under thousands of tons of waste, compressed, mixed with debris, scattered across acres of trash. Sierra Milton is told the truth in stages. First, your daughter didn't run away. Second, she was killed. Third, her body was thrown in a dumpster. Fourth, the dumpster was emptied days ago. Sierra makes a decision that no mother should ever have to make. She authorizes a search of the landfill. On March 21st, 2022, search teams arrive at the Macomb County Waste Disposal Facility. They mark off a grid. They bring in excavators. They start digging. For 5 months, volunteers and investigators work in rotating shifts. They sift through 18,000 tons of garbage by hand. The smell is unbearable. Rotting food, chemical waste, decomposing organic material. Some workers get sick within hours. Others push through masks and gloves, combing through trash bag after trash bag, looking for any trace of Zion Foster. The temperature climbs into the 90s during summer. The conditions become hazardous. Medical personnel stand by as heat exhaustion sets in. Sierra visits the site multiple times. She watches strangers dig through mountains of waste, searching for her daughter. Meanwhile, Jaylin Brazier sits in Wayne County Jail, watching news coverage of the search on television. He knows they won't find her. He knows the compactor destroyed any chance of recovery. He knows Zion is gone. Permanently, irretrievably gone. On August 12, 2022, after 5 months of searching, officials call off the operation. No remains found, no evidence recovered, no body to bury. Sierra has to go home and tell her 5 other children that their sister is never coming back. that there will be no funeral, no casket, no grave to visit on her birthday. Zion Foster, 17 years old, honor student, aspiring nurse, big sister to 5, reduced to a missing person case with no physical proof she ever existed beyond photographs and memories. Jaylin Brazier took that from her family. Not just her life, but her body, her dignity, her final resting place. He threw her away like garbage and made sure no one would ever find her. March 2022. Jaylin Brazier is arrested and charged with lying to a peace officer during a missing persons investigation. He pleads no contest. The judge sentences him to 10 months in Wayne County Jail. 10 months for lying about his cousin's death. On January 2023, he walks out of jail. Free. Sierra Milton watches him leave the courthouse, knowing her daughter's body is still buried somewhere in a landfill, and the man responsible is going home. For the next 6 months, Jaylin lives his life. He moves in with family. He sees his children. He goes to the grocery store, the gas station, the same streets where Zion's missing person flyers still hang, faded and torn. But behind the scenes, prosecutors are building a case. They start with his phone. Digital forensics experts recover data Jaylin thought he'd erased. Text messages sent to Zion in the weeks before she died. Sexually explicit, inappropriate messages from a 23-year-old man to his 17-year-old cousin. Messages that show a pattern. Then they find his search history from January 5, 2022, the morning after Zion disappeared. Can you be charged for murder if a body isn't found? How long does it take for a body to decompose? What happens to bodies in landfills? They pull phone records showing his location that night. The cell tower data places him at Sierra's house at 10:43 p.m. Then traveling back to Detroit. Then staying at his apartment until 6 a.m. They interview his girlfriend. She tells investigators that Jaylin called her while in jail and told her, "Deny everything. Don't tell them anything." She also mentions the scratches on his neck. The ones he claimed came from his cat. Prosecutors bring in a forensic expert who examines photos taken during Jaylin's first police interview. The scratches are consistent with human fingernails, not animal claws. They run in parallel lines down the left side of his neck. Defense marks. Then there's Jaylin's own testimony, 5 different versions of what happened that night. First, I haven't seen her in months. Second, my phone was hacked. Third, she had a seizure from smoking weed. Fourth, it was LSD, not weed. Fifth, she just stopped breathing. I panicked. Prosecutors compile witness statements. 32 people are called to testify. Friends of Zion, family members, neighbors, co-workers, police officers, forensic analysts. Each one adds another piece to the timeline. Then Sierra Milton takes the stand. She describes the phone call on January 5th when Jaylin told her he hadn't seen Zion in months. She describes standing beside him as they hung missing person flyers in his own neighborhood, less than 200 feet from where Zion's body was decomposing in a dumpster. She describes the 5 months spent searching the landfill. She looks directly at Jaylin and says, "You could have called 911, you could have called me, you could have called anyone, but you didn't. You threw my baby away and watched us suffer." June 2023. Jaylin Brazier is arrested again. This time the charges are different. Second-degree murder, tampering with evidence. He's held without bond. The trial is set for May 2024. May 7th, 2024. Wayne County Circuit Court. The trial of Jaylin Brazier begins. His defense attorney stands before the jury and presents a theory. This was a tragic accident. A young man made terrible decisions out of fear and panic. Zion Foster had a medical emergency, possibly a seizure, possibly an undiagnosed condition, and Jaylin froze. He didn't know what to do. He made the worst choice possible, but it wasn't murder. The prosecutor stands next. Innocent people don't Google, "Can you be charged for murder if a body isn't found?" at 2 in the morning, she says. Innocent people don't wipe their phones clean. Innocent people don't change their story 5 times. And innocent people don't throw their favorite cousin in a dumpster and help search for her while knowing exactly where she is. Over 7 days, the prosecution calls 32 witnesses. They present the Ring camera footage showing Zion getting into Jaylin's car. They present phone records showing his location that night. They present his Google search history, time-stamped, archived, undeniable. They present the text messages Jaylin sent to Zion in the weeks before her death. Messages that cross boundaries. Messages that show intent. They present testimony from Jaylin's girlfriend, who tells the court he instructed her to deny everything. They present the 5 different stories Jaylin told police, played back in audio recordings from his interrogation. I haven't seen her in months. My phone was hacked. She had a seizure from weed. It was LSD. She just stopped breathing. Each version contradicts the last. The defense argues that Zion had a history of seizures, that she'd been prescribed medication, that she could have had an episode that night, and Jaylin, high, scared, irrational, panicked, and made a catastrophic mistake. But the prosecution counters. If it was truly an accident, why didn't he call for help immediately? Why did he research murder charges? Why did he wipe his phone? Why did he lie for 6 days straight? On May 13th, Sierra Milton takes the stand. She sits in the witness box facing the jury and begins to speak. Zion just turned 17 in November, she says. She shares her location with me everywhere. She asks permission to go places because, as a parent, you want to protect your children. I have 6 kids. Zion is my oldest. All my children look up to her. Her voice cracks, but she continues. We were supposed to be planning her prom, her dress, her colors. I'm still getting emails from the school about graduation pictures. I can't do any of that because she asked if she could go with Jaylin, and I said yes. I trusted him. She turns and looks directly at Jaylin. He stares at the table in front of him. You said you panicked, Sierra says. Then why didn't you think about my baby? What if you were so high you didn't know she was alive and you just threw her in a dumpster? In the cold, without a coat. What if she was still breathing when you put her in that trash bag? The courtroom goes silent. Sierra's hands shake as she grips the edge of the witness stand. I will never know, she says. I will never see my baby again, and you took that from me. You took that from her brothers and sisters. You took everything. Jaylin wipes his eyes. His shoulders shake. He's crying. But the jury doesn't react. Closing arguments are delivered on May 14th. The jury begins deliberations at 2 p.m. At 2:40 p.m., 40 minutes later, they return to the courtroom. The judge asks, has the jury reached a verdict? The foreperson stands. We have, Your Honor. On the charge of second-degree murder, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. On the charge of tampering with evidence, how do you find the defendant? Guilty. Jaylin Brazier drops his head into his hands. His family members sob in the gallery. Sierra Milton closes her eyes and exhales, not in relief, but in exhaustion. The verdict doesn't bring Zion back. It doesn't give her a funeral or a grave or a place to say goodbye, but it confirms what Sierra has known for 2 years. Jaylin Brazier killed her daughter, and now a jury of 12 people agrees. June 3rd, 2024, Wayne County Circuit Court. Jaylin Brazier stands before Judge Donald Knapp for sentencing. The courtroom is packed. Sierra Milton sits in the front row with family members. Jaylin's relatives sit on the opposite side. No one speaks. Judge Knapp begins by addressing the court record. The sentencing guidelines in this case do not adequately reflect the severity of the defendant's conduct, he says. This was not a single poor decision. This was a series of calculated actions designed to avoid accountability. He reviews the evidence methodically. The lies to police, the lies to Zion's family. The Google searches at 2 in the morning. The phone wiped clean. The instruction to his girlfriend, deny everything. Then the judge turns to Jaylin directly. Zion Foster considered you her favorite cousin. She trusted you. That trust is what allowed her to get into your car that night without hesitation. And you abused that trust in the worst possible way. Judge Knapp's voice remains steady, but the weight of his words fills the room. You didn't call 911. You didn't call her mother. You didn't try to save her. Instead, you focused entirely on yourself, on what you might lose. Your girlfriend was pregnant, your children were asleep upstairs, and still, your only concern was protecting yourself. He pauses. Even now, after a jury has found you guilty, you continue to deny responsibility. When asked if you had a statement for the presentence report, you said, I didn't murder her, but the jury found me guilty. You have shown no real remorse, no accountability, no understanding of the suffering you caused. The judge reviews the tampering charge next. You disposed of Zion Foster's body to conceal how you killed her. And to conceal that you killed her at all, you made sure her family could never bury her, never say goodbye, never have closure. That was a deliberate choice, and it has caused immeasurable pain. Judge Knapp announces the sentence. For the charge of second-degree murder, 38 to 90 years in the Michigan Department of Corrections. Jaylin's shoulders drop. For the charge of tampering with evidence, 5 to 10 years. The judge pauses. These sentences will be served consecutively, not concurrently, consecutively. That means Jaylin must serve the full minimum sentence for murder before the tampering sentence even begins. Total sentence, 43 to 100 years in prison. If Jaylin serves the minimum sentence, he will be 61 years old before he's eligible for parole. If he serves the maximum, he will die in prison. Jaylin turns to look at his family. Tears stream down his face. His mother is sobbing. His siblings sit motionless, staring at the floor. Deputies approach and place handcuffs on his wrists. Sierra Milton watches from her seat. She doesn't cry. She doesn't react. She simply watches as the man who killed her daughter is led out of the courtroom. But there's no relief in her expression, because the sentence doesn't change anything. Zion is still gone. Her body was never recovered. There was no funeral, no casket, no grave to visit on her birthday. No place where Sierra can go to feel close to her daughter. Zion Foster, 17 years old, was thrown away like trash, and the person responsible made sure she would never be found. Jaylin Brazier will spend the rest of his life in prison, but Zion's family will spend the rest of their lives wondering where she is. If any part of her remains, if she's still out there, somewhere beneath the earth, waiting to come home. Judge Knapp's final words echo through the courtroom. You took everything from this family, and you will spend the rest of your life paying for that. The gavel falls. Court is adjourned. Jaylin Brazier is escorted out in shackles, and Sierra Milton walks out of the courthouse, knowing her daughter's case is closed, but her grief never will be. This case reveals something that repeats across investigations like this. Not every detail is unique to Zion Foster and Jaylin Brazier. The patterns show up again and again. First, when someone's story changes repeatedly, that's not confusion. Jaylin Brazier told 5 different versions of what happened the night Zion disappeared. I haven't seen her in months. My phone was hacked. She died from smoking weed. It was LSD that killed her. It was an accident. I panicked. Each time investigators pressed him, the story shifted. Each time evidence appeared, he adjusted his explanation to fit. That's not memory failure. That's someone buying time, testing what investigators know, and recalibrating the lie. Second, trust isn't automatic, even with family. Zion saved Jaylin's contact in her phone as Favo, her favorite cousin. Sierra never questioned letting her daughter go with him. Why would she? He was family. He'd been around for years. He'd visited the house. He'd spent time with the kids. But family doesn't guarantee safety. Familiarity creates access, and access creates opportunity. Jaylin used that trust to get Zion alone. Then he used it to manipulate Sierra for days afterward, standing beside her, helping search, pretending to care. The people closest to you know your routines. They know your vulnerabilities. They know how to avoid suspicion. Third, time destroys evidence. Police waited 5 days to file an official missing person report after Zion disappeared. 5 days. In that time, Zion's body was collected with the trash and buried in a landfill. Surveillance footage was recorded over. Digital evidence was deleted. Witnesses forgot details. The crime scene became unrecoverable. Jaylin knew exactly what he was doing during those 5 days. He wasn't panicking. He was preparing, wiping his phone, coordinating his story, coaching his girlfriend. By the time investigators took the case seriously, the physical evidence was gone. Ask yourself, what warning signs are you dismissing right now? What inconsistencies are you explaining away because the person seems trustworthy? What delays are giving someone time to hide the truth? Zion Foster should be 20 years old today. She should have walked across a stage in June 2022 and received her high school diploma. She should have moved into a college dorm, started nursing school, built the future she'd been working toward since middle school. Instead, she's gone. Not because of a stranger in a parking lot. Not because of a random act of violence. But because the person she trusted most, the one she called Favo, decided his freedom mattered more than her life. The danger didn't come from outside her world. It came from inside it. From someone who sat at family gatherings, who knew her siblings' names, who her mother trusted without question. Remember this. Pay attention when stories don't line up. Trust is earned through consistency, not familiarity. And when someone you love goes missing, time is the enemy. Push for action immediately. Zion Foster deserved so much more than what happened to her. She deserved prom, graduation, a career, a life. If this case stays with you, drop Justice for Zion in the comments. Let her name be remembered. Another case is waiting on your screen right now. Click it. These stories need to be told. Stay aware out there. And remember Zion Foster, the girl who should still be here.